I think it represents like longevity. So you don't want to cut the noodles before you eat them because you don't want to cut your life short. But as a kid, like I wasn't strong enough. My teeth were not strong enough to cut through the noodles as I was eating them. So I just like had a couple of times where I feel like I would be eating the noodles and I'd like have half swallowed them, but like half of them were like I was still eating half of them, and then I was just like, but my parents wouldn't let me cut the noodles because it's bad luck. Now that I'm an adult, I've realized we're all going to die anyway. Today we're making cold buckwheat noodles with kimchi and eggs. This is a riff on a Korean dish, and it's by one of my favorite chefs, Edward Lee, who developed this recipe for us a few years ago. It's like the perfect summer dish. It's like cold noodles. They're dressed in a saucy mixture of kimchi and some vinegar and sugar, and then you eat it all piled with hard-boiled eggs and cucumbers, and the most important thing is you finish it off with crushed ice, so that as the ice melts, it becomes this like soupy, brothy, briny liquid that's left at the bottom of your bowl when you're done eating. So just have half of a cucumber. What type of cucumber am I using? Just a nice one. Okay, and this is a little long, so I think I'm going to cut this in half again. And the idea is to just turn these into little strips. So I'm just going to take a little strip off of each end to make a little flat side, and then stand that up. And then I'm just going to create little planks. And you want them to be pretty thin because you want them to sort of mimic like the width of the noodles. So once you have your planks, I'm just going to stack them. So yeah, just like a few at a time. These get a little slippery, so just be careful. And these I've decided are just for eating.
Might take one.
Oh my god, of course. And then these we'll just kind of put into a bowl for later. These will go on top of our noodles. I'm also going to do some scallions that are also going to go on top. So for scallions, I think I'm just going to separate these where the greens start. And then I think I'm going to thinly slice the whites into rounds. And you can use the whole thing. I feel like the dark green tops of the scallions don't really get a lot of love in a lot of recipes, but they're kind of my favorite part. They're just more mild and feel more like you're eating a vegetable. I'm just going to take off the tops. I think it's kind of nice when they like vaguely like have the longish shape, so I'm just going to go at a bias. It doesn't have to be perfect. A bias is when you go on the diagonal, something like this. And then the last thing we need to do is nori. This kind, I'll actually just show you, like this is basically the seaweed that is used to make like sushi rolls, and this has been dried and roasted. So the one thing that you want to make sure of with nori is that like you don't want to get it wet, because you want to preserve this, like you can hear it. So I just fold it up, and I actually take a pair of scissors to make thin strips. It's the only time I personally would do this with a knife anymore is if I were, like if I just really, really cared for some reason about how they look. That's it. That's like every garnish ready to go, except for the kimchi, which we can chop later, or we can chop now. Number one, I was going to bring in my own because I got really excited. I was telling Tommy, like, I have half a gallon of it sitting in my house, which I brought with me on the subway. It's over there. Brad ate some. There's actually like a separate kimchi that you can find at like Korean markets that's only meant for like being turned into soups and stuff. And that is like the extra stinky, funky stuff, which is sort of what this has become. So this is Mother-in-Law's, which, as I was saying before, is like the brand that we like. It's the one where if I'm buying it and I'm not making it, like I'm getting this one. Lovely Rhoda tried to open the jar and prep it for us, and it legitimately exploded. Like, she was out of my sight and she was all of a sudden like, ah! Skyrocketed out. The lid was up to here and it was just like, ah! The cabbage was just like...
Yeah, it's common with the jarred stuff.
But for it to like...
Yep.
Okay, because I've seen it fizz up before.
Oh no, I boom all the way out. How it came in like held, like his pressure builds up and it expands with the gas. Even in within the cabbage leaves, so it's like more volume even under pressure in a way. I mean technically, I guess it's not more, but I don't know. You should be careful.
I've seen
got
that.
some kimchi on your right out of the gate, right on your jumper.
Well, you know, the hazards of the trade. What
everywhere
can I say?
but the apron got you.
If there's one thing you take away from this, it is that like when you're at the end of the jar and you have all this like liquid at the bottom, do not throw it out. It's just like pickle juice almost in a way, where it just adds a bunch of like vinegary, spicy, like jolt to, I mean, really anything.
Put in your Bloody Mary.
Oh yeah. Have you done that? It's a great idea.
It's delicious.
Right. Drained kimchi, and depending on the kind that you buy, like these are like whole cabbage leaves. So we just want to like chop these down to size. You just want it to be so that you're not picking up like one of these and trying to put these in your mouth. And at home, I actually have like a separate cutting board that I use only for kimchi. All right, bench scraper. So these are buckwheat wheat and sweet potato starch, and basically like when these cook, and I think for a lot of the times when people first try these noodles, they're like, whoa, like those are not cooked. Like, why are they so chewy? And that's intentional. Like you're doing it right. And the closest thing I can think of to like the texture of the cooked noodle is like a Twizzler pull and peel. It's like a mouthful of those. Often, like in the summer, Korean people eat naengmyeon, which is both the name of the noodle but also the dish pictured on here. And we're going to measure out 12 ounces.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Oh, here it is, by the way. So these are the soup packets, and you would just like dissolve these in water the same way that you would with like ramen soup. But we're not using these today, so we're just gonna put that to the side. Snack pile. Wow, my snack pile is getting really good. Cucumbers, nori, dehydrated beef broth. We're cooking these last. Like we're cooking these after everything else has been finished because these are going to start like getting a little bit like soggy and gummy if you let them sit for too long. So I sort of want to just get them in the boiling water and out quickly, and then toss everything sort of like a la minute. Yes, so we have boiling water that I should note is not salted.
What?
We always say heavily salted water. Arguably the most important part of this entire recipe is seasoning your pasta water.
Don't tell anyone yet. Well, Molly's not here, so typically with like a lot of Asian noodles, like you just don't really salt the noodles. I don't think that there's any harm in salting these, but this is just the way that I've always done it. And these are gonna cook for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then like the second they're done cooking, we're going to like completely drain them. There's no saving of like pasta water or anything like that. So we're just gonna get rid of all the water. This is why I like Asian noodles over pasta, just in general. It's like much more straightforward. I've just had so many moments where I've just like finished draining it and been like, no, because it was like later on in the recipe it would be like, and go back to that like 2 cups of pasta water that you've saved. Exactly. And I was like, no, dude. Pasta's extra.
It's extra.
Asian people aren't telling you to do that. Where did everybody go?
No one's here today.
Everyone was here today.
No.
I just saw everyone. Okay, well, don't go anywhere. The only real thing I'm looking for is that there's no hard part left in the noodle. These are definitely cooked. I'm going to take them off the heat to the sink, completely drain them. Okay, at this point, like, this is probably the most important thing in this whole, like, process is I want to immediately run them under cold water. You basically just want to give them a nice, like, vigorous massage. And what this is doing is helping to rub off any excess starch that's left on the noodles. You just want it enough that, like, the water that's coming through the other end looks like pretty clear. And then I'm just gonna make sure they're really well drained. This, I feel like you can almost think about as like a noodle dressed in like a kimchi vinaigrette. So to do that, we're just gonna take like a little bit of rice wine vinegar. This is unseasoned, and toasted sesame oil is going right in there as well. And that'll kind of give it like grounding. And the sugar is really important here. It actually, I would say, is like the most important ingredient in this whole dish because it just like counters the earthiness of the buckwheat in the noodles, like the nuttiness of the sesame oil, and then it also just like gives the kimchi something to like counteract with, and it just creates balance. That's basically it. The only things that are going to go into this are my chopped kimchi and our very important juice from the jar. And all that's just gonna go right in there. Do a little bit of that. And then the noodles are just gonna go right in. The beauty is that you can just do this all by hand, and it really like does not take a whole lot more than this. Do I get kimchi on my face? Okay, and I would actually say that could use a little bit of salt. And I think I'm also just gonna go with a little bit more sugar as well. It smells like sugar.
It smells like sugar.
Okay, so I'm just gonna eyeball that. And maybe just like a tiny pinch of salt. And we're ready to plate. This is just gonna be the last thing that we put on this dish. It essentially acts as both a cooling mechanism for the dish so that it stays cold the whole way through, but also as the ice starts to melt, it mixes with like all those seasonings, that kimchi juice, all that stuff that's like seasoning the noodles, and becomes this like watered down, really delicious broth that you just slurp down at the end. So I'm just gonna grab a big pile of that, making sure to just get like a lot of the kimchi in there. Okay, so in addition to the garnishes that we prepped before, we also have some hard-boiled eggs. These went for about 8 minutes. Maybe we'll do 5 of these. And then we're just gonna take some of our cucumber that we cut up. Just goes right on top. Scallions. Nori. And toasted sesame seeds. Last thing we're gonna do is put a big scoop of ice just all over the top. And that's really it.
I'm very excited.
You're very excited. I know, I am too.
Hungry.
I know. Well, that one's for you. You can have the beauty.
Okay.
Hi, Emil.
Hi, Jay.
I needed your support so much.
So happy.
I'm feeling very delicate right now. I can't deal with the strong opinions of the Rappo. But these are like buckwheat sweet potato noodles, dressed with like kimchi and rice vinegar. These as a kid, but they're like dressed in like kimchi. Oh shit! I forgot to ice us. Drop it.
Ooh, yeah. It's like
These are like beach noodles.
These are beach noodles. You could take them to the beach.
You could take them to the beach. Noodles on the beach. Nobody's doing that. I mean, somebody's doing it, but